Listen closely, because what I'm about to tell you isn't a story. It's an event that actually unfolded 3 nights ago at exactly 3:33 a.m. The shadows in the room began moving backward, and every clock in the building froze as if time itself had been stunned into silence. An emergency summit was called, the kind of gathering that hadn't happened in nearly half a century. Ancient voices cracked through encrypted channels, forgotten languages resurfaced like ghosts, and elders were summoned from their towers. Watchers were pulled from their posts, and analysts were ripped away from their endless streams of data, all for one impossible question that none of them could answer. Who armored this soul? The question trembled in the air like leaves before a storm, because they had been watching you for years, decades even. They tracked your patterns, documented your falls, celebrated your stumbles. They built files thicker than holy texts, designed algorithms tuned specifically to your frequency, and appointed specialists whose only job was to decode your weaknesses. But something shifted. Something happened that their instruments couldn't read. Something that made their calculations scream and their certainty shatter like frozen mercury striking concrete. They thought they had you mapped perfectly, knew exactly how much pressure would break you, exactly which buttons to push to make you fold. They tested you with betrayal, hammered you with isolation, poisoned you with doubt, and lined your path with carefully placed landmines. They watched you walk through fire after fire, studied how your tears fell, documented every tremor in your voice when you whispered, "Why me?" into empty rooms at 4 a.m. But then, you did something their prophecies never accounted for. You stopped breaking on schedule. You stopped falling apart the way they expected. Instead, you began absorbing the damage like a spiritual black hole, converting every wound into armor plating, every scar into reinforcement, every betrayal into another layer of impenetrable protection. That's when their panic began, because armor like yours wasn't supposed to exist in humans. The first watcher to report back couldn't even stop shaking. He had been assigned to you for 3 years, taking notes on your every move, your every relationship, your every flicker of vulnerability. Yet even he could no longer recognize the person he'd been sent to study. His assignment was supposed to be simple. Find the crack in your foundation, identify the breaking point, and return with the formula for your destruction. Yet when his final report landed on their desk, it contained only 3 words, written over and over like a mantra of defeat. They're becoming untouchable. The second watcher lasted just 6 months before requesting reassignment, confessing that monitoring you felt like staring at a star being born in reverse, like witnessing matter reorganizing itself against the laws of physics. Every attack that should have annihilated you only made you denser, more compressed, more dangerous. She noted that your energy signature had become unreadable, that her instruments would glitch and fail whenever she moved too close to your frequency. The third watcher, their most seasoned observer, vanished entirely, leaving behind nothing but a single note. Whatever we created, we can't uncreate. They've transcended the experiment. May the cosmos have mercy on us all. That was the moment they realized something had gone catastrophically wrong with their plan. You were no longer following the script of destruction they had written for you. You were writing something else entirely, something that rendered their 1,000-year-old protocols obsolete. By the time the 7th Watcher resigned, citing existential terror as her reason, the society understood they were no longer dealing with a subject but a force. You had become exactly what their founders had warned about in sealed documents never meant to see daylight. You had become spiritually militarized, armed not with weapons, but with an understanding so precise, so deep, it could cut through illusions like a laser slicing through smoke. And when they traced your timeline backward in desperation, searching for the origin of this impossible armor, they found nothing like a single moment of triumph or glory. Instead, they discovered it had been assembled quietly, piece by piece, in your darkest nights. When you thought you were dying, but were actually being reborn in ways their primitive tools could never measure. The first piece formed when you were betrayed by someone whose DNA was practically woven into your heart. That betrayal should have left a wound so permanent they could exploit it forever. But instead, you did something no text, no prophecy, no experiment had ever prepared them for. You thanked the pain. You held it close like a teacher, learned its language, understood its architecture, and then metabolized it into something harder than diamond. The second piece of your armor was forged in the year of total isolation, when everyone you thought would stay dissolved like smoke. They expected you to crumble under the weight of abandonment, to beg for connection, to lower your standards just to feel less alone. Instead, you transformed that loneliness into a forge. You hammered your soul against silence until sparks flew, until the essence of who you were began to glow with a heat they couldn't measure or contain. The third piece, and this is the part that truly terrified them, emerged not from light, but from your own shadow. It came from the part of you they believed they could weaponize, the darkness you carried, the rage you suppressed, the vengeance you chose not to take. You didn't fight your demons. You recruited them. You didn't simply overcome your darkness. You turned it into an ally, a weaponized form of power. You befriended parts of yourself that most people spend lifetimes running from. While this transformation was unfolding, the summit raged for 72 hours straight. Elder after elder presented their theories, their predictions, their increasingly desperate attempts to explain how a single human being could transmute trauma into armor of such sophistication. They unearthed texts from civilizations older than recorded history, consulted entities existing between dimensions, and ran simulations on quantum systems that technically shouldn't exist yet. "It's not possible," one elder whispered, his voice cracking like ancient parchment. "Humans don't have access to this kind of spiritual technology. Someone must have given them the codes." But every investigation came back empty. No interference, no mystical intervention, no hidden teacher. You had done this alone, in darkness, with nothing but your refusal to stay broken. Another elder, silent for 3 decades, finally spoke, his words dropping like stones into still water. "We created a monster by trying to create a victim. Every trap we set became their training ground. Every attack became their education. We didn't break them. We initiated them into something we don't understand." The youngest elder, barely 2 centuries into his position, voiced the thought that froze the room. What if they're not the only one? What if others are watching, learning, becoming? What if we've accidentally created a template for spiritual revolution? The silence that followed was heavier than gravity, because they all knew what that meant. If you could do this, others could too. And then they examined your armor more closely. What they discovered sent shockwaves through their entire organization. This wasn't ordinary protection. This wasn't the spiritual shielding their methods could penetrate. This was something entirely new, operating on principles they had never encountered in all their centuries of manipulation and control. First, your armor was adaptive. Every new attack, every attempt to find weakness, your armor would analyze, learn, and immediately develop immunity, like a consciousness immune system evolving in real time. They tried psychological assaults. The armor absorbed and neutralized them. They tried emotional manipulation. The armor converted it into fuel. They tried spiritual warfare, and your armor only laughed, growing stronger. And second, it was retroactive. Somehow, impossibly, your armor began doing what no one thought was possible. It started healing wounds from before it even existed. Traumas that should have been permanent vulnerabilities were being repaired from the inside out. Years of damage were being unwound, rewritten, and transformed, as if your present strength was reaching back through time to protect your past self, creating a temporal loop of protection they could not break. And then came the revelation that terrified them most. Your armor wasn't just adaptive, it was contagious. People who spent time near you began to develop their own layers of protection, not through teaching, not through speeches, but through a kind of frequency transmission. Your very presence had become a walking activation code for human resilience, awakening dormant defense systems in others without a single word being spoken. In their desperation, they tried everything. They sent their best agents disguised as lovers, friends, and opportunities. People designed to slip past your armor and whisper soft poisons into unguarded moments. Yet every agent returned changed. Some couldn't complete their missions, others defected entirely. One simply sat in the debriefing room staring at nothing, whispering over and over. They see everything. They know what we are before we know ourselves. They tried mirrors, thinking they could make you doubt your own power by reflecting a distorted image back at you. They created scenarios where you would appear to fail, seem weak, and be judged as broken. But by then you had developed something they never anticipated: complete immunity to external perception. You no longer needed mirrors to know who you were. You had become your own reference point. In their panic, they attempted time manipulation, trying to trap you in loops of your worst moments, forcing you to relive old traumas until you cracked. But your armor had made you temporally sovereign. Past, present, and future became just different rooms in a house you owned entirely. You could visit your pain without being owned by it. You could touch your trauma without being defined by it. Their final move was the most desperate of all. They tried to make you happy. Yes, happy. They believed that if they could give you everything you ever wanted, make you comfortable and content, your armor would soften, would crack from disuse. But you saw through it. You recognized comfort as another cage, happiness as another chain when it came from their hands. You chose your difficult freedom over their comfortable prison. And as the summit entered its final day, a terrible realization began to dawn on them. They had not been studying you. You had been studying them. Every test they ran, every attack they launched, every manipulation they attempted, you were collecting data, mapping their methods, decoding their patterns, and memorizing their fears. You had turned their surveillance into your education. "We're not the scientists anymore," one elder whispered, his ancient voice barely audible. "We're the experiment. They've been watching us. Watch them. They know our weaknesses better than we know theirs." The room fell into chaos as this truth rippled through their ranks like a silent detonation. How long had you been aware? How much had you known? How many of their secrets had you decoded while wearing the mask of their victim? The eldest among them, older than civilizations, older than most religions, rose slowly, his movements heavy with the weight of realization. His next words would echo through their halls forever. The armor isn't just for protection. It's for something else. They're not defending anymore. They're preparing. And with that, the real emergency snapped into focus. You weren't merely surviving their attacks, you were using their attacks as preparation for something far greater. Every blow they landed became your training. Every wound they inflicted taught you about a kind of war they couldn't even imagine. You weren't their victim, you were becoming their replacement. What they had failed to understand in all their analysis, their panic, their endless emergency summits, was that your armor was never designed for defense. It was always built for something larger. Every layer of protection was actually preparation. Every shield was a sword waiting to be drawn. Every piece of armor was a declaration of war against the very system that tried to break you. You weren't armoring yourself to hide. You were armoring yourself to hunt. Not for revenge. That would be too small, too human, too predictable. No, you were preparing to dismantle the entire architecture of control they had spent millennia building. Your armor wasn't just protecting you. It was protecting the mission you accepted on those dark nights when you decided that breaking was not an option. They had spent years trying to uncover who had armored your soul, but the answer had been in front of them all along. You did. With every tear that didn't break you, with every betrayal you refused to let define you, with every choice to grow stronger instead of harder, wiser instead of bitter, dangerous instead of damaged, you built it yourself. You forged your armor out of the very pain they tried to drown you in. And here is the truth that makes their eternal souls tremble. Your armor grows stronger every time they test it. Every new attack adds another layer. Every attempt to find weakness only reveals more strength. They have created something that feeds on conflict, that grows through challenge, that evolves through adversity. In trying to destroy you, they birthed their own ending, and you're wearing it like skin. The emergency summit ended with no solutions, only warnings. Warnings that spread through their network like wildfire. Do not engage directly. Do not test the armor further. Do not, under any circumstances, try to break them again. But it was already too late. The signal had been sent. Others had seen what you became, how you transformed, what was possible. Across the world, souls began to stir in their sleep. People crushed by the same system felt something shift inside their chests. The armor was no longer yours alone. It had become a blueprint, a living possibility, a whisper in the collective unconscious. You don't have to break. You can become unbreakable instead. And as their monitoring systems lit up with anomalies, they realized in horror that what they had feared most was already happening. One armored soul became 10. 10 became 100. 100 became 1,000. Each one forged their own unique protection, their own impenetrable defense, their own immunity to the weapons of control. What the society feared most was no longer theory. It was manifesting. A mass awakening of armored souls who could not be controlled, predicted, or broken. Panic spread through their ranks like venom. Emergency protocols activated. Ancient alliances reawakened. Resources they had hoarded for centuries suddenly deployed. All in a desperate attempt to stop what you had started. But how do you stop an idea that has already taken root? How do you fight souls who have learned to transform pain into power? How do you break people who have befriended the very act of being broken? Even now, as these words reach you, they are watching. The summit may have ended, but the surveillance never has. They monitor your reactions. They analyze your energy signature. They try to understand how someone once marked for destruction has become the very anomaly their encrypted messages now warn each other about. But when their eyes turn toward you, what they see is nothing. Not because you are empty, but because you have grown too bright for their instruments to register. Your armor reflects their gaze back at them, forcing them to confront only their own fears, their own limitations, their own inevitable obsolescence. You have become a walking blind spot in their reality, a glitch in their matrix that multiplies every time someone realizes what you've done. Others feel it when they draw near to you, not because you call them, but because armored souls recognize each other. There's a frequency you emit, a silent signal that says, "I survived, and I became something else." Those building their own armor sense it, respond to it, align with it. You've become a beacon for the unbreakable, a gathering point for souls who refuse to play victim any longer. And what terrifies them most is not your strength, but your peace. They expected anger, vengeance, bitterness. Instead, they find you moving with the quiet confidence of absolute protection. You don't flinch because you cannot be hurt anymore. You don't rush because you cannot be stopped. You don't scream because you no longer need to be heard. Your armor made you sovereign, and sovereignty seeks no validation. Their projection models all reveal the same inevitable outcome: a future where their methods fail, where their systems crumble, where human souls evolve beyond manipulation. A future where the armor you forged in darkness becomes standard equipment for anyone who chooses transformation over victimhood. They see it now, An empire built over 1,000 years trembling, not from riots or revolutions, but from something far quieter and infinitely more unstoppable: evolution. Their nightmare isn't a war of swords and fire, but a war of consciousness, a shift so deep it renders their entire infrastructure irrelevant. They are haunted by visions of the children being born now, children who will grow up knowing your story, witnessing your example, understanding from their first breath that armor is possible. These children won't wait for trauma to forge their protection. They'll build it preemptively, consciously, deliberately. They'll be born fluent in the language of resilience, in the knowing that no external force can break a soul that refuses to participate in its own destruction. They dread the inevitable moment when armored souls stop being anomalies and become the majority, when their ancient systems of control collide with millions who simply cannot be controlled, when their weapons of fear, shame, and manipulation strike and shatter like glass against diamond. They glimpse a future where their hierarchy of predators and prey dissolves, where their roles as predators are reduced to relics of a darker age, a museum exhibit from a time humanity has evolved beyond. This isn't rebellion, it's an extinction event for their way of thinking. But most of all, they fear you. Not because you'll retaliate, but because you won't. Your refusal to play their game, your indifference to their power is more devastating than any act of revenge. You've moved so far beyond their paradigm that you've become incomprehensible to minds that only understand dominance, coercion, and control. You are something they have no protocol for, a soul that needs nothing from them, not even justice. That is what terrifies them most. You are not fighting for their destruction. You're thriving in their irrelevance. And here is the truth they didn't dare speak aloud during the emergency summit. The truth only the eldest among them knew and carried like a curse. They have seen this before, eons ago in another age, with other souls who discovered the same armor. Those souls didn't just protect themselves, they rewrote the rules of reality itself. They bent the grid, reprogrammed the field, shifted the blueprint of consciousness until the old systems simply collapsed under their own weight. What you've developed isn't new, it's ancient, older than their society, older than their control systems, older than the walls they built around human potential. It's the original human design, the architecture of the soul before the tampering began, before limitations were installed, before souls were trained to break instead of bend. You haven't invented something. You've remembered something. You've accessed code that was meant to be deleted, activated systems that were supposed to stay dormant. They know what comes next, because history is circular. Souls like yours don't appear randomly. They arrive at precise intervals, like cosmic alarm clocks waking humanity from controlled slumber. And the last time someone developed armor like yours, entire civilizations didn't just rise. They transformed overnight. Empires vanished. Systems dissolved. The collective consciousness leapt forward in a way no weapon could stop. They fear, because deep down they know. It's happening again. Power structures that once looked immovable, that seemed eternal as mountains, are dissolving quietly like salt vanishing into water. Kingdoms of control, built brick by brick over centuries of fear, are collapsing not through violence, but through inevitability. The impossible has already become inevitable. And this inevitability is what truly terrifies them. Their panic is not born from your singularity. It's born from your universality. You are not a lone miracle. You are proof. You are the first drop of rain before the storm, the first crack in a dam about to burst, the tremor that precedes the earthquake. You are the signal that an age is ending, and something untamable, something they cannot contain, is beginning to rise. They know they cannot stop it, because they have tried before. Across ages and civilizations they have tried. They've buried the truth, rewritten the records, silenced the voices, and erased the names. Yet every time the pattern returns. Every time a soul like yours remembers, and every time their empires collapse, not from outside attacks, but from inside awakenings. Deep down, in the marrow of their ancient bones, they know the cycle is repeating, and they know their failure is already written. Without speaking, without teaching, without lifting a single weapon, you've begun transmitting. Instructions pass through you as naturally as breath. Your armor has become a living manual, a sacred text in motion, showing what becomes possible when a soul refuses to accept the programming of perpetual wounding. The signal isn't words, it's frequency. It vibrates in silence, it echoes through presence, it seeps into the unconscious of everyone ready to receive. And though it's silent, it is louder than thunder. It says, remember who you are. Trust your pain as a teacher, not a tormentor. Let your wounds become wisdom. Let your scars become stars that light the way. Every encounter with you becomes a transmission. Every person who looks into your eyes downloads the code. Some don't realize it consciously, but their soul recognizes it instantly. Your presence itself is reprogramming the collective blueprint of what humanity is capable of becoming. You are teaching without trying, leading without speaking, transforming without forcing. You are living proof that armor isn't built by avoiding suffering. It's built by swallowing it whole and reshaping it into strength. That true protection doesn't come from walls that shut the world out, but from integration that brings the shadows in and makes them allies. That strength isn't numbness, it's the courage to feel everything and still choose to rise, to expand, to become more, not less. Your very existence has begun rewriting the ancient manual on human resilience, and society can do nothing but watch. They see their victims becoming victors one by one simply by following the template you've created, refusing to break on schedule. Their carefully engineered trauma programs are failing. Their division tactics meant to isolate are becoming bridges of connection. Their isolation chambers, built as prisons, are turning into transformation pods where souls hatch into their highest forms. Every weapon they forged for control is being reforged into a tool for liberation. And it all began with you, with your armor. 3 days after the summit dissolved in chaos, their most sensitive listening devices captured something that made even their eldest hearts skip like broken drums. They heard you, not addressing them directly, but addressing the silence, addressing the cosmos itself. Alone in your room, you weren't whispering into emptiness. You were speaking into eternity. And the words they recorded confirmed the nightmare they had whispered among themselves but never wanted to believe. Your voice was steady, calm, carrying the weight of a truth older than their systems. I know you're listening. I have known for years that sentence rippled through their archives like fire through dry grass. Because in that moment they understood the real horror. You had never been their subject. You had always been aware. While they thought they were studying you, you had been studying them. While they thought they were measuring you, you were measuring the limits of their control. And now you weren't just surviving them, you were surpassing them. Every test, every attack, every attempt to break me, I felt you watching. I felt the eyes behind the walls, the data streams flickering with my name, the silent scribes turning my pain into reports. But here's what you never understood. I was never your victim. I was your student. While you thought you were dissecting me, I was studying you. Every move you made, every pressure point you pressed, every trap you set became part of my education. I learned how you operate. I learned what you fear. I learned why your time is ending. This armor you've come to fear so much, it isn't mine alone. It never was. It belongs to everyone who chooses it. To everyone who decides that breaking is optional. That pain is not the end but a beginning. That wounds are not scars but blueprints for power. I'm not special. I'm simply first. But I'm not last. Not anymore. Can you feel it? all the souls armoring up, all the souls taking the blueprint I created and improving it, sharpening it, strengthening it, evolving it. A silent army born without commanders, born from nothing but choice and memory. You wanted to know who armored this soul. It was you. Every attack you sent taught me defense. Every manipulation revealed a truth you wanted hidden. Every betrayal you orchestrated showed me the true contours of loyalty. You were my unwitting teachers, and I was your best student. But the lesson is over now. School's out. And the student has become something you never planned for, immune to your curriculum, transcendent of your tests. As your society's members dispersed from the emergency summit, they enacted their final protocol, the one reserved for existential threats they cannot contain. It's called the withdrawal. They're pulling back their direct influences, their agents, their energy from my sphere entirely, not because they're surrendering, but because they've learned the same pattern over and over. Engaging with me only makes me stronger. They're hoping that without their pressure, my armor will atrophy. That without an enemy to defend against, I might soften, might forget, might return to being breakable. This is their last strategy. Complete disengagement. They are betting that I need their conflict to maintain my edge, that I require their attacks to justify my armor. But they've miscalculated again. My armor isn't held together by their aggression. It is self-sustaining now, powered by purpose rather than defense. It no longer feeds on their opposition. It feeds on my mission. I don't need them to attack anymore because I'm not defending, I'm building, I'm creating, I'm teaching others simply by existing at this frequency. Their withdrawal isn't giving me peace. It's giving me space. Space to work. Space to expand. Space to teach. Space to become something they cannot imagine. The irony is almost too perfect. They spent so much energy trying to break me that they never stopped to ask what I would do once I became unbreakable. They never planned for a soul that didn't need conflict to grow. They never considered that evolution could happen in peace as easily as in war. They never envisioned someone who could turn their absence into just another form of presence, another teacher, another tool for growth. They thought withdrawal would starve me of fuel, but they have only cleared the battlefield for my next phase. Without their interference, the frequency spreads faster. Without their surveillance, the blueprint multiplies. Without their attempts to crush me, countless others rise, each one taking my signal and refining it into something even stronger. They have created the very future they feared. And now all that remains for them is to watch from a distance as what they tried to suppress becomes unstoppable. That's all for today. Dear Father, I pray for the growth of my faith. Help me trust you even when physical evidence is lacking. Let me believe in your perpetual presence, knowing you will never harm me. I understand that your thoughts for me are thoughts of prosperity and not harm, to give me a good future. Thank you, gracious and eternal Father, for always listening to my voice. I offer up this prayer to you in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you, Jesus, for your love and provision. I am grateful for your presence in my life and the abundance you bring. If this video resonated with you, please like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with those who need to hear this message. Leave a comment below about your journey and how you are preparing for your own triumphant return. If you'd like to support our work, please consider contributing through Buy Me a Coffee. This helps us continually improve our content to offer you the best. The link to Buy Me a Coffee is in the description. No gift is too small. Whether it's a penny, a prayer, or a share, your generosity helps spread God's word and brings hope to others. Don't stop here. Watch our next video for powerful revelations about the signs that reveal you are the chosen one. We've enjoyed following this spiritual journey with you. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Keep shining brightly and embrace your destiny with courage. See you next time. Blessings to all the beautiful souls from the Enlighten wisdom.